Now I would like to introduce our first speaker. It's Ian Roberts. Ian Roberts made his studies and PhD in the University of Wales in Swansea in Great Britain for biochemical engineering and food, and then he joined Nestle. He was with Nestle for 18 years. He held there several positions in the field of innovations. He was innovation director in Mexico, and at the end he was head of food science and technology research. Since 3 years he's now with Bühler. He is the chief technical officer, and he is also in the board of directors of partners in food solution. So please, Ian, for the first subject, thinking beyond production value chains, interaction and complexity in food systems.
Dorit, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much to the organisers. It's a great privilege to be asked to come and speak here today to such a fantastic audience. And I don't have the easiest title, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity to talk to both academic leaders and thought leaders and the people of tomorrow who are going to inherit our legacy. And at the moment, I don't stand here tremendously proud of what we're going to leave you. And I think it's very important to understand the challenges that face us in the future. And we've seen a perspective, an excellent perspective this morning from Professor Lawrence, really detailing all the data, all the facts. We've seen the view from Duncan Pollard of what they're doing as a consumer-facing company to educate consumers and to work all the way along the value chain. What I would like to do is give you the perspective of a company called Bühler, who most of you have never heard of, even if you're Swiss, and try and explain how we view this situation and how we try to act in order to bring greater sustainability to the value chains within which we do business. So I think to start with, does anyone know who Bühler are? Yeah. Hey, super, that's better than I ever received, thank you. It's very unusual anyone knows us, but I will talk about this a little bit during the presentation. But first of all, I think we face pretty unheralded or unique challenges today that we haven't seen before. If you look at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development statement of their wishes for the future, 9 billion people live well within the limits of the planet. So 9 billion people, whether it's 9, whether it's 10, whether it's 2030, whether it's 2050, we have to accept now that's inevitable. Live well. Well, I'm afraid we've set the benchmark for live well. We saw all the data this morning on the excesses of meat protein consumption. We see the excesses of car ownership. We see, is there anybody who is only carrying one of these? It's a small group. So we all want stuff. Everybody has the right to the quality of life that we've defined. And within the limits of the planet brings with it an extraordinary environmental responsibility. Now we have said 9 billion people. Well, we're nowhere near 9 billion people at the moment. We have 700 million people currently suffering from undernutrition, according to FAO statistics. And that's already good news, because that's 200 million down in the last 20 years. Yet our population is going to grow. So there's a clear challenge there around food security. We've got nearly 20% of the population in developing markets living on less than $1.25 a day. This doesn't give them economic access to food. It's very, very clear. On the other hand, we have a growing health burden because we have 1.5 billion people obese. And this is going to be dragging down the economies of the Western world and hindering our capability to solve the other issues. But we have a unique opportunity. We may have food security, but we have the internet. How many tweets per minute go out on the internet? Anyone know? You almost can't be wrong because no one knows because it changes every hour. Any guesses?
1,000.
1,000 tweets per minute. Okay, anyone higher?
100,000.
100,000. Yeah, good. You're perhaps the youngest person in the room then. So I'm in the dark apparently. So 100,000 tweets per minute. This means that communication is inevitable. Connectivity is inevitable. Now we've seen what happens if you have high connectivity and you have food insecurity, then you can't hide it. People take action, they self-organize. But at the same time, people will self-organize and use the internet in order to tackle issues around food security. So we have no escape, total transparency. If you look at China, you have 500 million people on WeChat in China. The Great Firewall of China meant that there are wonderful systems running that are competitive to Facebook. 500 people on WeChat, and the government has guaranteed safe food to the population. Now what happens in a controlled environment of media when 500 million people are on WeChat is you can't keep it secret if you have a problem. So one of the biggest potential threats to the stability in China is food safety because you have connectivity amongst the people. So this environment is changing completely, and of course we leave you the legacy of youth unemployment growing fast and that issue looming. And all of these drive political instability, food insecurity, connectivity, youth unemployment. So we have a bit of work to do before we hand over to you, I believe. What I'd like to talk today, I'll continue a bit the introduction and the background. I want to talk about technology and access and wealth creation and give you some examples of how we believe it's possible to act and things that we've actually done through the company. Food safety and process efficiency, talk a little bit about collaboration and give you some final thoughts about perhaps where we can look for solutions more broadly than we have in the past. I thought for consistency it's very important to start with the definition that was given by the conference. I think it's an excellent definition when we talk about food security. One thing that struck me, economic access. Economic access has two sides. It was also brought up this morning. There is a need for equitable growth. There is a need for growth and distribution of wealth in such a way that people can afford products to ensure food security. So from an industry point of view, however we do business must be ethical, it must be sustainable across the value chain, and it therefore must be distributed in such a way that people can afford the products that we bring to the market. So if we look at the value chain, and this is something that I think the next speaker from Syngenta will talk about, is the agricultural part. We've had an enormous focus on agriculture, and we cannot understate the importance of agriculture in job creation, in wealth creation, and in the food security battle, and huge improvements of yield. But many times it's been done in isolation. Many times we meet with states from India, we meet with governments in Africa, and they're very, very proud. They've improved production 5 times per hectare, or sometimes 15 times per hectare. But some of these are perishable goods. And if there isn't a demand that matches this improvement in supply, then you have a massive increase in waste. It makes sense. And we've seen this again and again and again, that people don't think along the system of the value chain. It was great to hear it this morning of looking back along the value chain. We have to do this. So agricultural improvement is very, very important, but integration of the total value chain is also critical because, as I put, everything must be demand-driven. Otherwise, you create waste and you create inefficiencies. If it's demand-driven, that means it's relevant to culture. We're talking about food. We see these wonderful aid programs where everybody tries to go in and make people eat peanut butter. Okay? That might be great in areas where people eat peanut butter. but it's not necessarily the solution. How do you solve the problem of utilizing the local raw materials to the local tastes, adhering to the local traditions and lifestyles, bringing in food safety, bringing in convenience? Then you are demand-driven. You have to industrialize it in a smart way. Supply should be safe. I mean, we have to think about this. We have to think about this. It should be operator safe. You can't have a different quality standard for an emerging market in terms of safety as you have for a developed market. That's unacceptable. You have to have one standard. It must be safe. The food must be safe. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. It should be basically healthy. It should be nutritionally valuable. If we look at alternative proteins, we need to look at what are the possibilities to utilize local alternative protein sources that are relevant to diet. Everyone talks about soy, but if I go to some countries, they say, soy, that's great, that's for animals. That's not for humans. If I go to China, it's a massive part of the diet. If you don't understand the local differences, you make some very serious mistakes and you're not demand-driven. Efficiency is critically important. The losses are astronomical. The mismanagement of logistics, the mismanagement of payments. What's your incentive to be a farmer if you don't get paid? What's your incentive to play in that value chain if the money comes in 3 months or 6 months later? It doesn't work if you have no cash as a business. There's no incentive to participate. You have to drive scale. Everything is about creating as much scale as possible, as early as possible in the value chain, because that gives greater power to the people at this end to ensure fair prices. And it gives them the economies of scale to create enough money or justification to invest, to upgrade, to create additional value from their products. And this is tremendously important. We have to enable people to act entrepreneurially, to start their businesses, to create new businesses, to create employment, and also that means that all of the rules around business governance have to be in place so it is possible to do business in these environments. Now, one area Professor Lawrence picked, I think number 4 on his list this morning, is what needs to be done. Number 4 was reduce waste and reduce losses. We lose or waste 1.3 billion tons of food per year. Now, if you ally that with 700 million people with undernutrition, it's quite an uncomfortable balance to live with. And we believe it's very important that we tackle the issues where we as a company have capabilities to impact, which is around losses. We have no consumer contact. We leave that to the guys that are brilliant at consumer marketing to try and influence consumer behavior. But this is a massive quantity. Now, you've all seen the data, but let's take the example here of sub-Saharan Africa. Total available food lost is more than 20%. This is primarily in areas of production, handling, and storage. So this is post-harvest. It's lost because of poor storage conditions. It's not dried. The logistics aren't good. There isn't enough scale. The truck only comes once every X weeks. It's unreliable. They can't get enough product together to go to the next stage of the value chain. And it's not stabilized fast enough. Now, I think eliminating those losses would make an extremely significant contribution to reducing food insecurity. And of course, as you know, in our world, it's our complete inability to manage our fridges, our homes, and to accept that perfect quality is the only thing we will consume. So it's a real behavioral issue that at least each and every one of us can act upon within our own sphere of influence. So why, as Bühler, I promised you I'd tell you what we do. Why is this interesting for us? We're this little, tiny, family-owned company. You still haven't worked out what we do yet, most of you, because I haven't told you. We sell the processing equipment that allows these people to process. So we sell, for example, for Nestle, chocolate making equipment. But we don't process the food. We provide the capability. Okay? So we come from Uzwil, between St. Gallen and Winterthur. We're 150-something years old. We're a family-owned company. Now, when I arrived 3.5 years ago, I said, now we need a sustainability mission. This is really important. And they said, why? Why do we need a sustainability mission? Why do we need a statement? And I said, because you have to have one. It's expected of you. We have to talk about what we do. And actually, if you look at what the company says, for years, we have this vision of innovations for a better world. Now, I have to say, when I first arrived, I was a bit skeptical. Because everybody has a vision that is kind of plus or minus those words in a different order, right? So we said, no, I'm going to look at this and I want to understand if I can believe in it, if I can stand behind it. So hopefully today I'll convince you a little bit. We have a mission which is pure sustainability. And I think what's very interesting there is this is something that many family companies have. Because we don't have to publish, we're a family company, but we do. We publish transparently. Now, we said we want to ensure a sustainable independent development of the Bühler Group. Well, that's very interesting. We grow from cash, we take no debt. Not many companies do that. Products, processes and services which contribute to a substantial improvement of quality of life. So the sustainability mission is inherent in the working principles of the company. And then our promise is to engineer customer success. Not just because we're nice guys, but successful customers means sustainable business environment for us. So we try and make our customers more successful. Now, I told you we're a small family company, but we're 2.3 billion Swiss francs turnover, so we're a fairly successful small family company. We have over 10,000 employees worldwide. We have a massive dedication to education. We have over 500 apprentices in training at any time. This is the foundation upon which we build our success. This is basically the secret of Switzerland, isn't it? Brilliant academics and rock-solid apprentice scheme. We run the apprentice scheme all over the world. We have classrooms where we teach simultaneously in the US and in China. We run apprentice schemes in India. We train wherever we go. We educate the people who will work for us, and hopefully they will stay with us. We operate globally. We run production all over the world. We invest 5% of turnover in R&D. So before I spoke, you hadn't heard of us. Do you know how many people every day touch a product off a Bühler line? Any feeling? You can do it in percentage of the world's population to make it easier. 50%. Okay? We have two businesses, food and non-food. 3/4 of the world's car headlamps, 90% of the world's banknotes, most of the world's smartphones, computers, they all have components from Bühler in. 2/3 of the world's wheat flour goes through Bühler lines. 2/3 of the world's chocolate, 3/4 of the world's malt. But no one's heard of us. Which is okay. We don't mind. So, why is food security very important to us? Not only do we process staple crops and staple foods, 20% of our turnover is in Middle East and Africa and 30% of it's in Asia. These are areas where food insecurity occurs in the highest levels. So for us, it's very important when we have solutions that these solutions should become available. What do we do? I told you, 2/3 of the world's wheat flour, 2 out of 3 loaves of bread have come off a Bühler line worldwide. Okay, not just Switzerland. 30% of the world's rice, rice being the most important staple food on earth. 50% of the world's maize, the staple food of Africa. 2/3 of the world's chocolate, the staple food of Switzerland, I guess. 40% of the world's pasta. Oh, and that one should have been breakfast cereals. So we supply solutions from agriculture, we don't touch. I leave that to Syngenta, they do it much better than we do. Post-harvest, we do storage, cleaning, grading, ship loaders, ship unloaders, storage, flour mills, and pasta plants, breakfast cereal plants. Now, if you think of that coverage of the value chain, with the exception of one person in this room, which is probably Nestlé, we have the broadest coverage of any company in the world, providing enabling technologies across the value chain, but not minding who the partners are, as long as they will work together to begin to optimize that system to create wealth across the value chain in a sustainable manner. We focus very clearly on what we can deliver there. Very simple: waste. Our technology, our capabilities, our network should enable customers to reduce losses and waste by half where we have influence. So that's between manufacturing and storage. We have very little influence on the waste side with consumers. Sorry, we're tackling losses. Energy. One of the big issues around efficient value chains is cost. And after raw material costs, the principal cost driver is energy. Every year, we install enough technology to require an additional medium-sized power station. Every year. Now, if I multiply that by 154 years of experience, we've got a little bit of making up to do. And we think it's very, very important that we drive this efficiency and resource efficiency through all our technology in the future. Just as a comment, we would love also to tackle water. We only do dry processing. But if we reduce losses, the cumulative water footprint of that, having from field all the way through to point of loss, has a very major impact. So when we reduce losses in terms of crops, we also reduce losses and wastage in terms of water. Food safety is critically important. I'm going to show you an example, because safe food is not a given. In many, many places, safe food is a luxury. And we even see in developed markets, like the US, with consumer habits changing, would you actually imagine eating frozen pizza frozen as a snack? Some students do. There's no kill step. You can't guarantee it's safe because it was the student's job to cook the pizza and they chose not to. So even in developed markets, you face issues. In developing markets, there are serious headaches. And all of these things make a value chain much more efficient and much more economically viable. If you want to add value, you mustn't forget about the nutritional value. The number of crops that are processed and raw materials that are processed in order to guarantee food safety, the nutritional value is removed. And then you can pay to put it back in. Now, if I look at a sustainable, cost-effective balance, I'm not always comfortable with that. And I think we should fortify intelligently only what is not available in the raw materials, and we should work with processes to modulate the availability of the nutrition from the raw materials. So that's why we're interested in food security. That's basically at the core of our company. These aren't slides I made for today. This is what we do. One of the key areas, I think, is appropriate technology access. We have many, many solutions. If you look at food security, we have many, many solutions available. I would argue that we would have the capability to reduce the losses almost to a negligible level if we were able to roll out the technology that is already available. And in order to do that, we need to use our know-how smartly. Now this is a nice story. We run within our company an innovation challenge. We get all of the workers to come, all of our employees worldwide, to propose ideas of things they believe that the company should do. Okay? One of them came from our South African team. This is a maize mill. This is a maize mill that runs at 2 tons per hour. Now you're going to tell me a smallholder farmer cannot process 2 tons per hour. You're right. But our concept is not happy farmers. It's farmers with technology that allows them to grow and to become wealthier if they want to. Okay? We don't force them to. It's not subsistence farmers with expensive technology who are just subsistence farmers with expensive technology. So we will not go below a certain economy of scale because they have to be able to create wealth. Otherwise, there's no payback on their investment, and it's not a business, it's philanthropy. And it's not very smart philanthropy. So we developed this. It goes in 2 shipping containers. You can take it out to farmer cooperatives. This is for maize. We work always with public, private, and usually governmental organizations to put these technologies in. I have a nice little video for you. I'll only show you 3 minutes. If anyone's excited, they can see it on YouTube. It's not made by us, which is why I think it's okay to show it. It's made by an NGO called AgDevCo. It's a British NGO, and they advertise their work, and when we were watching their film, we found this technology solution in it, and I think it just explains it better than we ever could. So, could you put the film on, please?
One of the businesses that AgDevCo has supported is Eka, an agri-processing company working with over 5,000 local farmers. Eka is located on the outskirts of the small town of Katandika in central Mozambique. The business was founded 4 years ago with startup capital from AgDevCo. Eka's farmers receive seeds, fertilizer, and training to help them increase their yields of maize, groundnuts, and soya.
To ensure you have a sustainable business and to be able to scale it up, you need strong partnerships. AgDevCo has actually come to play that role. Our relationships with AgDevCo go beyond just normal business practices. They do have a lot of heart and soul that they've put into the project.
I'm so proud that I've made a big difference to farmers. I've improved their lives.
I think they've got huge opportunities as well, which they probably wouldn't have had before.
Ndinotarisa kuti utano hwangu inini nehwemhuri yangu huri kusimuka kumberi nekuda kwokuti tinokwanisa kudyawo zvatinonga tichifarira.
Zvatoda kutarisira kumberi uko, gore rapera ndakatenga mombe dzangu 2, asi gore rino ndida kufungidzira zvotoda kutenga zve2 dzite 4.
zvese ndapera kuita vana vari kuenda kuchikoro vamupfunza desima segunda akishava yanyaya yega iyi vamunopfunza nona mugona.
At harvest time, the farmers are guaranteed a market for their crops at a fair price. Eka sends trucks to pick up the crops from local collection points. Farmers then accompany the crops to Eka's central warehouse and processing facility, where they receive payment.
The scales that we use are quite transparent. Everything that we do is above board. The farmer has to know his kgs. He looks at the scale and he sees what kgs are coming out from there, and he knows exactly how much he's going to get.
Yanga yakanaka kubva gore rapera kusvika wakangotenga zvene mutengo wacho weyo wanga wakanaka. Kuti awaito usenza tatopiwa zvesimba kuti tisenzere zvakawanda nekuti akaona mutengo wegore rapera wakatifadza.
It's a very humbling experience as well as proud just to see the farmers out in their fields and to see the farmers proud of their growth as well.
Asikonjeratori chandagula magetsi hapo.
Ndasigiri zvakawanda kurima kwandakaita gore rapera ndasigiri motombeki yangu ndasigiri badza remombe asi sogone netarire kuti da utenga mombe dzangu.
Saka ndadzakuza mumunda wangu kuti panotenga 5 hekitari pano zvino kana kuti 6 itimizana maripi yagore rakapera iyo ndisenzisa mupi muyeka.
With AgDevCo's investment and management advice, Eka has been able to purchase a state-of-the-art maize mill, producing flour, grits and bran. The grits are sold under a long-term contract to a local brewery, which gives the farmers a guaranteed market.
So I think it shows the principle. I mean, technology access allows to unlock a significant change in quality of life of a large number of people if the organization and the infrastructure is put in place. The other thing that I think is very interesting from that video is, what do the farmers say? One talked about a freezer. Okay, so I would say that's quality of life, that's safe food. One talked about, we'll keep doing it if we keep getting paid. This is a business. This is a business proposal. You'll notice none of them talked about having nice technology. They talked about the capability to be paid and to create wealth. And the other talked about education for their children. So I think this is the key things. If we're going to build a sustainable environment, it has to be business viable, win-win for all players. And there has to be the reinvestment we saw in the farms in terms of productivity, and we saw the enabling education for the next generation, which I think is critically important. Now, somebody mentioned mycotoxins in Western Africa. I think you did this morning. As an example of how collaboration across the value chain is necessary. You know, mycotoxins are a serious problem. 25% of the world food crops affected by mycotoxins. I think we all know the health risks. We're all aware of this. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't seen this data from Kenya about the number of deaths. I mean, this seems to be publicized everywhere that anyone talks about this topic. There's something that we tend not to talk about, which is you buy a ton of maize and you're accepting 20% loss. That's not economical. As a consequence of that, it's frequently cheaper to import across multiple borders from outside of the country where you're doing your production, because it's cheaper with the 20% loss taken out in order to import. So there's a huge impact on the sustainability of value chains. Now, I'd love to tell you that we have a marvelous machine that solves the problem, but I'm afraid that just doesn't exist. This is a value chain approach. It starts with agriculture. It starts with good farmer practice. It starts with seed selection, with crop protection, smart collection points, driving scale, stabilization in terms of drying, good transport. Where we've made a big breakthrough is in terms of sorting. So optical sorting at many thousands of grains a minute, examining each one, looking for the secondary effects of aflatoxin presence and ejecting them. And I think this is a very important step forward that, in combination with smart management, allows you to get some very interesting results. So not only does it allow us to tackle food waste or food losses in the value chain and make the value chain more efficient, it brings a significant benefit in terms of food safety. We've been running some trials here using mechanical and optical cleaning. You can go from 64 to 14 ppb, but the balance is always, how much do I lose? So it's an economic balance between food safety and losses. The earlier in the value chain you treat, the less losses you have. If you treat before you put it on a ship, you can have 3% losses instead of 20% losses. So if you think of the total value chain, you have significant benefits in these examples. So I will cover 2 more points, and then I'll stop. Yeah, 2 more points and 1 slide to wrap up. Torrid mentioned, I sit on the board of Partners in Food Solutions. I think collaboration is going to be tremendously important. With the connectivity we all now carry in our pockets, there is no choice but to collaborate, because that's how people will work and people will think. To emphasize how far we've come, I sit on the board of directors of this NGO, Partners in Food Solutions, but this is an NGO which is General Mills, formed by General Mills in response to a request from Kofi Annan. General Mills, Cargill, DSM, and Bühler. What do? We don't throw money at situations. A little bit. But We have 800 volunteers across our companies from R&D and specialty areas. We have 50 people on the ground in Africa. They identify small growing food businesses with an ethical filter, domestic purchasing, domestic sales, so that you create domestic wealth and jobs locally, a nutritional profile to the products, and we build teams that we send in to put a generation of knowledge into these companies in 6 months to help them grow sustainably. So we give our knowledge, which is the most precious thing we have in R&D-driven organizations. So I think if we can do that, and if other companies are doing this, and many others, there are great examples, that's just one we happen to be involved in, I think that shows a great step in terms of the need of collaboration and the openness to collaborate to bring very, very significant impact. There's over 400 companies who have been helped like this. And I wouldn't be doing justice to my friends at ETH if I didn't mention the World Food Systems Center. I think this is another way that collaboration becomes more important. First of all, the near miracle of getting 34 professors from different areas to collaborate together is very impressive, but to get multiple industry partners around the table as well, and industry partners representing adjacent points in the value chain, which means that we can support in terms of data, in terms of perspectives, and we can look across a value chain and use data to optimize those value chains. We're just starting a big supply chain resilience or value chain resilience project with Joe Six, which I think he'll mention later. So in summary, I won't talk about that. What do we need? I would say access to technology is absolutely critically important. It doesn't help if we keep reinventing stuff when all we need to do is take existing capabilities and make them available in order to change lives. Practices, training, agricultural practices, farmer practices are critical. Scale processes. You can't have each smallholder farmer doing their own processing. You have to scale either on cooperative level. You must create, you must aggregate at the earliest possible point to make mechanization possible. But use intelligence, sensors, traceability, all of these systems available to us. Ensure access to knowledge. So this, and education is going to be critical. Online training, all of this work around MOOCs. We can reach hundreds of thousands of people easily with basic training now. Don't take people through the same evolution we have. We have Internet of Things, smart data, we have MOOCs. These enable new business models, create the entrepreneurial environments to utilize them to solve these problems. These aren't new problems, but they're problems that we have to think about in a new way and a smarter way if we want to solve them, and ensure collaboration and systems thinking. So I think this is a responsibility to lead for future generations that we have to take up. It's a legacy that we leave that currently doesn't look like something we should be too proud of, and it's impossible to do it without a very high degree of collaboration. So thank you very much.
Now, are there any questions? Yes, please. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Professor Tom from University of Bern, Business Economics. You told about different goals, objectives, very important objectives you have. The basis is, of course, profit and cash, because you want to grow from cash. But you also mentioned the customers, and you mentioned the employees, especially the apprentices. Wonderful. Now, concretely, how do you break this down in a concrete management by objectives? For instance, take your own as Chief Technology Officer. What are your annual objectives, as an example? And second question, if we look at these apprenticeships, a wonderful investment, I think, but how to guarantee the quality? We have only in the German-speaking world this very concrete system of dual education, on the job, off the job, perhaps plus online, etc. But how do you guarantee? You told about 550 apprentices worldwide. How do you guarantee in the different fields, young millers and others, to have a real comparable level of education.
Good.
Your own MBO and the apprentices. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. That's a set of easy questions, isn't it? I take the second one first. If we talk about the apprentices, I'd be very open. 90% of them are Swiss, from Switzerland. Okay? But we run that apprentice scheme around the world. When they go to China for 6 months, they have their Swiss teachers teaching them, and we've built all the telecommunication systems that they can attend the classes whilst they are in China. So we don't interrupt their education. So there we're just talking about the Swiss standard. If I take the example of Minneapolis in the US, I mean, we've opened up the apprentice scheme there. We've worked with the state. We've worked with the government. We have certificates being put in place with the local technology colleges. And we've become the preferred employer for this area. And we build the apprentice scheme, taking the very best of the Swiss and the German apprentice schemes for engineering, and we transfer those. If we talk about young millers, we still train nearly 90% of the world's head millers. They go through our milling schools. In November, we will open another milling school in Nairobi, which will be 100% Bühler owned, purely to train millers in Africa, because the cost is prohibitive to move people from Africa into Europe for training each time. So I think that covers the second part. The first part was, how do I transfer my nice slides into something concrete? Yeah? Okay, so we have several mechanisms to do that. I mean, you obviously have the cascade of objectives, and we set our objectives very, very concretely against these deliverables. So that's one part, and I think all companies have that. We also have things called change projects. And so, for example, one of the change projects would be the transformation of the portfolio to meet these promises. And I tell you, this is a very effective way, because the 4 change projects are on the wall behind the CEO's desk. And every month, with my project teams, we have to go to the CEO and my colleagues on the executive board, and we have to explain our progress, and we have to ask them for support in debottlenecking where we're not moving fast enough. So we have a tremendous transparency, and we have an executive board level visual tracking of everything. And believe me, if you've got a red mark next to your project on that wall, behind the CEO for a whole month, and he sees it every time he gets up from his chair, you are incentivized to move a bit quicker. So we have very strong cascade mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. The last question. Yes, please.
Yeah, my question is with regard to developing world, based on the fact that the smallholder farms are increasingly becoming smaller, and the technology that Bühler is developing may be focusing on large pieces of land. What are the strategies that you are putting in place to correspond to this, because farms are essentially becoming smaller?
Okay, so first of all, we don't supply agricultural equipment to farmers, so we supply the next step. And we're very clear, it's the lowest level of industrialization that we supply, because farmers alone, as a smallholder farmer, cannot afford the next step of the technology unless they're self-organizing into cooperatives. So unless aggregation is driven to create scale, they cannot step up to the minimum industrial level. But we're very clear. There are qualities that we will not go beneath. There are safety standards that we will not go beneath. We just have to say we don't do business. But we will then work with partners, particularly with NGOs, to look at how these cooperatives can be aggregated. And we will also work with the next step of the value chain, because it's no good providing a technology or selling a technology to a cooperative if there isn't a guaranteed demand of that technology. So we will try and work with the adjacencies in the value chain to put them together so that if an investment is made, a demand is guaranteed. And this makes it easier. But to go down to a very low scale is not something we will do.
Thank you, Ian. And to keep up with the time, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you.